Hello everybody. Welcome to day 3 of week 3 of our Monday Munchie series. Today we are going to be making Okonomiyaki, and it's a little bit of a step process. So we're gonna go through things one by one. Again, we are using Namiko Chen's website, justonecookbook.com. The link will be below. She does a really good job breaking everything down, so you can really read through. The 2 recipes I've made so far have come out top notch, so I have high hopes for this one. Okonomiyaki means grilled as you like it. So okonomi means as you like it, yaki means grilled. So that just basically refers to you can make okonomiyaki in so many different ways. Add your own different types of toppings that you like on there. You can make this vegetarian by not putting the pork belly in. Substituting, I think she recommends mushrooms or pretty much whatever you want to put on this bad boy, you are welcome to. What we're using today is cabbage, which is necessary. We're going to be using Nagaimo. Nagaimo is a mountain yam. It's found in Japan, and I think I was reading it said it's also found in China too, but don't quote me on that because I'm not sure. So we're going to be using this as well. We've got 4 eggs, some katsuobushi, dried bonito flakes or dried fish flakes. We have tenkatsu. It's basically just tempura bits that have already been fried. Then we do have those infamous teriyaki seaweed snacks. I was supposed to get aonori, still couldn't find it for some reason. So we're just going to use the teriyaki. We'll do a little bit of it on top. It's just a topping. So we're going to see if we like it. We're grilling how we like it. So we're going to try the teriyaki flake ones. We've got flour. We also do have sugar, baking powder, and salt as well. We've got Worcestershire sauce. This I had to get, oh no, I didn't have to get it on Amazon. One of the Asian markets I went to, the first one, which was Lee's Oriental Food and Gifts. Lee's Oriental Grocery Food and Gifts, I think is what it's called. They had the okonomi sauce, and we could have made our own, but I wanted to try this, so we're gonna try it. Oh, I'm gonna put that back in its place. Then we've got oyster sauce, that QP mayo. We're also going to be using ketchup. And, then we have the pork belly, thinly sliced. Ooh, I had Wegmans do the dirty work for me. It already came pre-sliced, so. So the first step to making okonomiyaki is making a dashi. What's dashi? Dashi is a soup stock, very common in Japan for a bunch of the things that they make there. So to do this, we're going to take this little 2-inch by 2-inch piece of kelp, a half cup of the katsuobushi, which is the dried bonito flakes, and 2 cups of water. I'll see you over at the stove where we're going to boil these. If you watch my other ones, you'll know there's always time for a coffee break. Today I've got my Icelandic rune coffee cup. I got it in Iceland. It is a Wayfinder rune called Vegvisir. And I have French toast coffee today from Bones Coffee Company. This is not an ad or sponsored. I just love their coffee. It's good. Take a little drink to get me going, and here we go. All right, so the type of dashi we're making today is called an awase dashi. Say that 10 times fast. Awase dashi. What she recommends doing first is cutting some slices into the kelp to release the flavor. I don't know how many slices. I did 3 on each side and then like 1 in the middle here. All right, next we're going to add our water. 2 cups of water right in the pot. And we're gonna give our little kelp a bath. Our little kombu a bath. She says to do this on medium-high heat because you want it to bring it to, I always feel like I'm playing the piano when I talk. Because you want to bring it to a slow boil. So we're going to let that get boiling, and I'll be back with you in just a little bit. I lied, we're back. What you need to do while this is boiling is to clean the dashi. To make sure that you have a clean dashi, you need to skim the foam and any debris that comes up to the top. And right before it starts to boil, actually we're going to remove the kombu. If you leave it in, it's going to become slimy and bitter, and we don't want that in our dashi. we're just gonna go ahead and wait for it to boil then. And so I'd like to know in the comments below if you guys have ever had okonomiyaki before, or if you think you're gonna try this recipe, or if you had tried this recipe, let me know what you think about it, because I'm pretty excited. Even Namiko-chen says it won't come out exactly correctly, but if you're looking for an okonomiyaki fix while you're at home, we're crafting that here today. I see what she's talking about now. There's definitely some little filmy stuff on the surface, and this is not going to work to get that off. So what she uses is actually a mesh strainer, which I don't have. I didn't see that she was using that. I would have tried to grab one. But we're gonna make do, as always in this series, with what we have. And I've got a little tiny tablespoon, so we're gonna try skimming with that. Might not be completely perfect, but we're not going for perfect. I actually didn't have okonomiyaki when I was in Japan. I had it for the first time. I was learning Japanese in college, and my sensei one year decided to do like a little Japanese party. It was super cute. And she brought like old books from home that her kids didn't need anymore, like little manga books. I got a little Doraemon book from her, and another book too about wolves or something. It was a story. It was cool. Anyways, she made us okonomiyaki and it was really good, and that was my first introduction to it. And then I actually had it at this place in DC, Washington DC, or just outside, called Tanpopo. 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 They also do a really good takoyaki, which is just octopus tentacles in a ball of dough. And it came out really good there too. I think we had ramen there as well. It was a while ago. It was really good though. I still think about the okonomiyaki from there though. I really wanted it, so I hope this turns out even like remotely as good. Alright, so I'm not exactly sure how to tell when it's just about to boil, but I think we're getting there. So this is our third installment of Monday Munchies for the Crossing Borders show. Let me know what has been your favorite recipe you've made so far, if you've made any of these, or your favorite video so far. As always, like and subscribe to let me know I'm doing a good job. This is kind of a new thing for me to be doing. I'm not really like a vlogger. I don't know if this counts as a vlog, but something different I decided to do since we can't travel the world. Sorry, I'm having fun with these. I think it's almost time to get the kombu out of there. So what we're gonna do is grab the kombu out and throw it away. And we are gonna go ahead and take this kombu out of here. She says to do it gently. So, goodbye, kombu. And then from there we're gonna add the katsuobushi. This smell just smells like a Japanese restaurant, or like the miso soupy. It just smells Japanese. It's really good. Okay, now that it's at a boil, we're going to lower the heat, let it simmer for 30 seconds. Once it's been simmering for 30 seconds, then we're going to turn off the heat and wait for the katsuobushi to go sink to the bottom. It takes about, she said, about 10 minutes. So I'm going to let this go. What I'm going to do after this is just strain it, and we'll have our dashi. So I will meet you back over at the counter to start making our okonomiyaki. First step to make okonomiyaki is to make the batter. So we're going to put it in this bowl here. We're going to start with our cup of flour, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. Baking powder. A 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So we're going to do 1/4 teaspoon of sugar. Put this away. by the way, our kombu has gotten to the bottom now, so I'm going to go ahead and strain that. So we're just going to let that sit and strain while I make the rest of the batter up here. I'm going to go ahead and whisk it. Whiskey business. Wish it was whiskey business. A little whiskey in my coffee. One way to start a morning. Next up is this bad boy, this Nagaimo. We have to peel this and grate it. Got your tools here. Let me get a bowl real quick. She does make a note here that the Nagaimo can be really aggravating to your skin and cause you to itch. It doesn't happen for everyone. Apparently she doesn't have an issue with it, but it can happen. So just in case, once you're done handling the Nagaimo, not with this part on there, I don't think, the skin or whatever, but the actual inside, just wash your hands real quick just to make sure. You should be washing your hands anyways in the kitchen, but just to make sure that it doesn't aggravate your skin. It is also going to be super slimy and slippery. Not my favorite texture, but here we are. So we're just going to do a quick peel on this, maybe a little. I have this little part in here that I'm just going to take out. Oh, it is slimy. You get to watch me hate my life for the next couple of minutes here. Am I a baby? Maybe. But I just don't like slimy stuff on my hands. Now we're just going to grate it. I don't want to hold it anymore. So I did just wash my hands. It wasn't making me itchy. It's just a sensory thing I don't like. So while I'm not touching it, I didn't want my hands to be slimy. I forgot to mention that your Nagaimo should be about 5.6 ounces. I actually had bought more than I needed. I just cut it off and put away the stuff I didn't need, but just make sure you're measuring your ingredients when you're using them. It's very important. Here we go. It is gross. I underestimated how much I was going to hate this process, because I did in fact read this beforehand. I was like, oh, that's okay. It shouldn't be too slimy, even though she said it's very slimy. I was like, how slimy can a vegetable really be? Very. So at least it doesn't make my hands itchy on top of also just feeling disgusting. Coffee break while I get the dashi, which, well, looks good. It looks just like her picture. So we are going to add the Nagaimo into our batter. Also, we're going to add the dashi as well. Oh, look at it. Look at it. That's not what a vegetable should look like when it's grated. Look, it looks like mashed potatoes. It's just mashed potatoes, Becky. It's just mashed potatoes. We actually made more dashi than we needed. She called for double this amount, so I'm glad we only did half. We got my 1/4 measuring cup. We need 3/4 cup of this, and I'm gonna skim it from the top, since that part shouldn't really have any of the katsuobushi remnants in it. Should do a little more because one of mine was a little short. We're gonna whisk this up until combined. So hers is really not lumpy, and mine is lumpy. Maybe I didn't grate the Nagaimo quite good enough. No, because that's what hers looked like. Hers just looks really, and almost more watery. Mine looks more thick. But we're gonna trust the process. All of her other recipes have worked really well so far. What we're gonna do now is cover it in plastic wrap, and we're gonna pop it in the, almost at the oven. We're gonna pop it in the refrigerator for about an hour. But what that does is it helps to relax the gluten in the batter, and it's gonna actually make your okonomiyaki fluffier. Okay, so I hate plastic wrap. I feel like it never works. This freeze-tight stuff, it says it's used commercially. I don't know where we got it from, but it works like a gosh darn charm, my dudes. It sticks
like it's supposed to.
So our okonomiyaki is in the fridge, chilling. So we will see you back here in an hour for the next steps of our okonomiyaki process. See you then.
Next up, what we have to do is, oh, before I forget, remember how I told you the oyster sauce and the Worcestershire sauce we were gonna need?
We don't need this. It's to make okonomiyaki sauce, and we bought that. So.
All right, so our first step is to go ahead and cut up the cabbage. What we need to do is chop it up real fine. So we're gonna just do a little chip of chopping.
I'm just gonna measure how much cabbage we have real quick. We should have 740 grams. I'm like 200 grams off, but.
I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm fine with that. Woo! We're gonna go ahead and chippity chop some more. We're going to take the pork. Look at that. That's just nice. Oh, it has a nice texture to it. Let's do like the professionals do and just toss that over my shoulder. We're just slicing the pork in half, all these nice thin slices. Cut those in half. And set those aside. All right, so we have our dough, our batter rather. I'm not cool enough for that. So we're gonna add our, okay, so what we're gonna do now, we have our batter that we've let rest for an hour in the fridge, and we have our bajillion amounts of cabbage. This looks like not enough batter for this much cabbage, but again, we gotta trust the process with Namiko-chan because everything else I've made from her has come out spectacularly. So we're gonna do this a third of the cabbage at a time. That's it, it's about a third. We're approximating. And you're just gonna mix it in until it's well combined. You can see that. All right, so what we're actually supposed to do is add the eggs and the tempura scraps and the red ginger. So let's go for our eggies. It's 4 eggs. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Alright, give my hands a quick wash after that, always.
So, we need a 1/4 cup of pickled red ginger in here.
And then we need a 1/2 cup of that, get in there. Need a 1/2 cup of the tonkatsu. So we're gonna head and just scoop this out. Oh, they're so cute. They look like little Rice Krispies. Look. Oh, they smell very fishy. But they look like little Rice Krispies. It smells so fishy. Well, maybe they cooked them and it was like in shrimp or something. I don't know. It's fine though. So now we're gonna whisk it all in there. This looks like more batter for the cabbage because before it just did not look like it was gonna be enough. This makes me feel better. Now we're gonna add the cabbage in 1/3 at a time. I did already do 1/3, so we'll put in another third. There goes more cabbage. Cabbage down. All right, so we're gonna go until that cabbage is well incorporated into the batter. We're gonna add the rest of the cabbage in there. and make sure that gets well incorporated while also trying to not lose any cabbage because we already started off with not quite enough cabbage. And that's fine, really. I think it'll still come out fine. Hers does look way more cabbagey. But, sorry, Namiko-chan. Don't come at me for that. I don't think she will. She seems very nice. The next step is to heat some vegetable oil or whatever, like plain flavored oil you have, whether it's olive oil or vegetable oil. I have vegetable oil. Welcome back the big old thing of vegetable oil. So say a happy hello. Like I said, I bake a lot. We do a lot of baking in the house, so we've always got our vegetable oil out. It doesn't say how much vegetable oil to do, it just says enough to make a circle in the pan, so I'm guessing it's not much. So what I'm going to do is get this set up over on the stove. I'll meet you over there and we'll start cooking up our okonomiyaki. See you there! So in our pan, this is a large pan, but we're going to be doing one at a time. So I'm very comfortable with this pan. It's the same pan that we did the mitarashi dango in. It's non-stick. I like it. And we're just going to pour a little bit of veggie oil in there. I don't want too much. We're going to get that nice and coated. We're going to wait for this to heat up. So what we're going to do once this gets hot is we're going to pour the batter in just like a pancake. I'm using this little cool ladle that we have. It's probably not actually that cool, but we're going to pour that in a circle. And she said, Namiko says to make the okonomiyaki pretty thick, but if you're a beginner, to try it thin first. So we're going to start with a thin one so it's easier to flip, and then make a thicker one on my second try. I'm actually impatient. I'm so impatient. Nope. So I put a little bit of the batter in here, just so I know when that starts sizzling, we can go ahead and cook it up. We can start pouring our batter in there. Do I have cats today? My supervisor hasn't told me whether I'm doing a good job or not today, so I don't know if I am. If you weren't here from the last week's video, one, you should go check it out. There will be a link somewhere around here to check out the last episode where we made mitarashi dango. And I had one of the family's cats, actually I have two of them, come in here and supervise, and yeah, they told me I was doing a good job, so. They're not in here today, so I'm a little worried about my performance. Ooh. Oh, here's sizzling. Can you see it? Sizzling. Alright, so this is just weird because it's just a weird batter. Obviously, because it's not a pancake batter, it's thick. Thick. I am going to make a thicker one. I believe in myself. I can do it. This actually might be thin compared to, I think she said like 2 centimeters. What did she say? Yeah, like 2 centimeters thick or something. I don't think that's going to be this. And then what you do is put a couple of pieces of pork on top. Oh my god. I love the texture of this pork belly. I don't know why. She says to do 2 to 3 slices. Mine's small, so I can only do 2. And then we're going to cook it covered for 5 minutes. Just put the plate down so we are done cooking them. Oh, there we go. We can pop them right out of this bad boy. I did find a bigger lid. It's not big enough for the whole pot, but it's at least so the pork's not touching it. I don't want to squish the okonomiyaki. I just want it to cook. The next one I do cook, I am going to use just the metal lid on top because it'll cover it more, because it is popping up at me, this oil. So do be careful of that. If you're not covering your pan all the way, you're just covering the okonomiyaki, it will still pop at you. Like that. So, ooh, I can tell the bottom's nice and crispy. We're actually going to turn that down. That's cooking it very, very well. So we've got a nice crispy surface. We're going to cover that shit back up and let it cook for another 5 minutes. Then we're going to let it cook uncovered for 2 more minutes. And then we're going to do our next one. We are now ready to flip this bad boy over and cook it for another 2 minutes. Oh, that pork looks good. So I'm going to finish cooking this for the 2 minutes uncovered. This is the part you cook it uncovered.
And then we're gonna transfer that to a plate, cook one more all together, and then I'm gonna meet you guys over at the counter for some, it's like decorating, or garnishing. We have, I think this one's the best, it's the one I just cooked too. It looks really crispy, it looks really good. So this is where the okonomi part comes in, the make it as you like it. We're kind of gonna put whatever I want on there. I don't like mayo a lot, but I do like okonomiyaki, and it does have the Kewpie mayo in it, so we are going to use it. Also, when I went to take the little thing off, it's a little star that you squeeze through. I thought that was cute. So I'm gonna use the mayo. We're gonna use the okonomi sauce. We got some scallions here I'm gonna put on top. And I did crumble up some of that seaweed. It was supposed to be the aonori, but we had the teriyaki seaweed. It just smells like fish. It doesn't smell like teriyaki, so I think we'll be okay. Said I was only gonna make 4, but if you can hear, I still got a couple cooking. I don't think I made them big enough at first. Like, this is a pretty big monster one, so there are some still cooking. I'm also going to be using this katsuobushi. What we're gonna do is I'm gonna start with the mayo. Just gonna boop, 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 boop. Drizzle that on there. Then I'm gonna do the okonomiyaki sauce. I'm gonna go the other way with it and do it this way. We're going to sprinkle that on there. Sprinkle some of that seaweed on there, and then I don't want this to touch my hands, but here we go. Not a huge fan of it, so we're gonna put just a little on top. And there you have it. There's your okonomiyaki all dressed up. I'm big on briny. I like olives. I like pickles, so I'm really liking the pickled ginger a lot. So I'm gonna put some on top of that. Although I'll be honest, I don't know if the restaurant I've been to put that on top, but I really like the flavor, so we're gonna go for it. Look at it! It looks like it came out good. It looks like I'd get it in a restaurant. The way they'd make it, it smells right. I don't know why I'm nervous. It doesn't make any sense to me, but it looks so pretty. It's pretty good. There is a textural thing. It's very good. It's very good. I just think when it's cooked on like an actual grill, you probably get more of a char taste, or like so maybe it's not textural, but like a char taste, or like a different depth of flavor. But it tastes good. I don't think I'll put these seaweed flakes on there next time. I'm not really a fan of them on there, but it's crispy. It's got the right flavor from the mayo and the okonomi sauce, and that pickle and ginger are so good. So yeah, I recommend it. Namiko-chan of Just One Cookbook. She's not going to steer you wrong with her recipes. They've all been delicious. Like I said, I don't know why I was worried about eating it. It was weird. So if you really like this and want to check out more of our content, every Monday we have Monday Munchies, so go back and watch the ones you haven't seen yet. So if you want to stay tuned for next Monday's episode, make sure you like, subscribe especially. That'll hit the little bell icon, I believe. That'll get you notifications when we post videos. And yeah, also down below we have the link to Namiko-chan's Just One Cookbook. Also, we have a Patreon up and running where different tiers will get you different rewards. And so for this month, there will not be anybody's names in the credits because I just started the Patreon, but when you sign up, next month your name will go in the credits. If you go to a certain tier, you'll get special videos that other people won't have access to if they're not at that tier. For the Monday Munchies series, it will be, we're going to do 2 recipes this month, but usually 1 to 2 recipes. So the link to our Patreon, link to our merch shop, link to our website, and of course, again, the link to Namiko-chan's Just One Cookbook, so you can go ahead and check out Namiko for yourself and try some of these recipes. And we will see you in the next one. Bye guys!